I'll get this. Cannabis Culture Headquarters. It's not a matter of getting ahead in life, it's a matter of enjoying it while you're in it.
Yeah.
You see, then, because if by the time you're 70 and you say I was poor mostly but you were happy, then it's not, you know.
You don't always get what you want.
You don't always get what you like, but you better enjoy what you get, right? So it's just, and I'll be saying that a lot probably in the future. Well, for me, marijuana doesn't come with any downsides. So unlike alcohol and cocaine, they'll make you do immoral, bad things when you're using them, like totally separate from your regular personality. I mean, but that never happens with marijuana. No one steals to buy marijuana. No one commits immoral acts on it. It doesn't change you. It doesn't make you an aggressive person. In fact, it makes you a cautious, thoughtful, pacifistic person, and it's its reputation, and it's a well-earned reputation. If you have Crohn's disease, it's tremendous help to ease the pain in your bowels, because it's a bowel wasting syndrome. If you've got epilepsy, it'll reduce your number of seizures and allow you to get off the medicines they've given you. If you've got well, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis, it's the best thing to help someone with MS get functionality back into their limbs. If you've got diabetes, it's going to help you deal with the medicines they give you to keep them down. This is true for people on chemotherapy. So and that's just people who have a medical need for cannabis. But something more substantial, I would say, is the enlightenment it brings to everyone who uses it, and it opens up your thought processes. You begin to empathize more readily with other people who are different from you. That's why when we pass a joint in a circle, everyone's welcome, and that's because we have a one world, one love view of the world, not as a place divided up by borders or nations or races, but one unified Earth population that's all in this together. It has very little downside. You'll never die from it. It's not toxic. There's no lethal dose level. And that's unlike anything else in the world. I mean, tobacco will kill you, and it's legal, and they don't go to jail, and the alcohol is legal, and they don't go to jail, and the doctors that give out prescription drugs that kill thousands of people every year, not a single one of them is going to jail. There's this fabulous hypocrisy in society today, and 250,000 people are in jail at any one time for cannabis around the globe, so it's up to me and others like me to reverse this terribly unjust situation. Cannabis is also a peaceful exercise of freedom, and we live in a free society, and no peaceful democratic, lifestyle should be ever thwarted with criminal sanctions and punishments like jail. It just doesn't make any sense. And the big question we all have to ask ourselves, that I've dedicated my life to, is what has the public, what has the citizen benefited by this prohibition? I mean, we've had it for 45 years. It's tens of billions of dollars. 2 million Canadians have been criminalized. Millions and millions of their relatives and family members would have been heartbroken seeing them go to jail and get arrested and all that just for marijuana. Well, what's the public benefit been? I mean, if we talk about high taxes, at least someone could say, well, you have health care, you have sidewalks, you have roads, but what's the benefit from prohibition? There is no benefit. Everybody laughs when pot's mentioned, whether it's comedians saying it every night like Jay Leno, or whether it's politicians. Politicians even make jokes, what have you been smoking, when they're trying to be critical. The interesting thing is that everybody knows marijuana is harmless, except a few police propagandists and a few government propagandists. Marijuana is not a criminal act. Marijuana is a choice, a lifestyle choice, like vegetarianism, or Christian, or a Falun Gong, or any number of peaceful, honest philosophies that other people may or may not understand, and we should be entitled to explore these things. Marijuana is illegal not because it's dangerous to the health of the person, it's just dangerous to the health of the government. Remember, 27 million North Americans are on antidepressants right now, out of a population between Canada and the United States of 330 million. 27 million people on antidepressants who don't care as much, who aren't getting as worried as much, whose edges are taken off. Isn't that a good reason, I think, why no one protests the war in Afghanistan now, even though it's gone on as long as 2 world wars, or the war in Iraq, right? No one gives a shit because everybody's drugged out. We drug out our young 10-year-old boys. 5% of all the young boys in BC are drugged out on Ritalin. Many of our teenage girls with antidepressants these days to deal with peer pressure and all this sort of stuff, well, that's deadly wrong decision to make. We have people drugged up so they don't care, and that's just what the government wants. The more pharmaceuticals in society, the better for them. The more marijuana in society being used, the worse for them. And marijuana can replace so many of those pharmaceuticals as well. So whereas marijuana is an antidote to many of our societal ills. It's not an antidote to big business. It's not an antidote to big government. That's the problem. Too many people are smoking pot, according to the liquor companies, according to the pharmaceutical companies, according to the government. And who are the two biggest lobbyists? Alcohol and pharmaceuticals have enormous lobbies, both in the United States and Canada. We have to suffer. That's why I'm going to jail for 5 years. Did I hurt anybody? No. Are there any victims? No. Well, what a very peculiar circumstance that someone would even bother to be extradited to a foreign country, to be taken into their courts and sentenced, and there's no victim. And there's nobody complaining. Right? Well, why is that? It's because I must be made to suffer. I must be punished for my point of view. That's all this is. That's all any marijuana person goes to jail for, is to be punished for their point of view, because there's no other reason. And in this society, the Conservative government's made it acceptable to punish people for their point of view. First of all, Canadian sovereignty has just been trashed. I mean, if you're going to try and tell a sovereigntist in Quebec that the reason to stay in Canada is because your Canadian citizenship has value, you'd be hard-pressed to explain that using my example. In fact, I think I'm going to be used as a great example by the Bloc Québécois as to why Canadian citizenship is worthless. So there's no value under a Conservative government of Stephen Harper of even being Canadian. Well, if I can be sent to the United States, anybody who does any business with anybody in the United States about marijuana could be extradited. And it trivializes the value of Canadian citizenship, and it also really, it's an injustice because I didn't hurt anybody. Nobody like me should be going to jail. And unfortunately, there are thousands and thousands of Americans like me every year that get outrageous sentences, 5, 10, 15, 25 years for all marijuana-related offenses that are completely like medieval, right? And that don't even exist anywhere else in the world outside of draconian dictatorships like China or Iran or Vietnam. Well, Bill C-15 is a very good example of the philosophy I've been articulating about the Conservative Party. They actually have it in there that you get mandatory minimums for a variety of offenses involving marijuana and other drugs. I mean, if you want to criminalize someone by saying we're going to take away your house, which you won't even do for a rapist, but if you grow marijuana, we'll take away your house, we'll take away your kids, we'll take away your job, we'll put you in jail, we'll embarrass you in front of your neighbors, we'll basically strip away your fundamental constitutional rights to privacy. This is exactly the same behavior we had in Nazi Germany in the early 1930s before the Holocaust got full-blown. Jews weren't allowed to be civil servants. Their children couldn't go to schools anymore. They weren't allowed to have their own stores. They couldn't live in neighborhoods with white Christian people. Jews had to live in their own ghetto. And so that's how that evolved. Well, we go through the same ostracization, ghettoization, and demonization in our culture. And Bill C-15 will make it worse. It'll put those parents of children in jail for a year. How does that help their children? Their children will have to go to a foster home, children's aid society, or relatives. It's barbaric. And so all these marijuana laws are at the end of the thing. There's a big barrel of a gun pointed at our head. The latest Angus Reid poll actually said 52% of Canadians want to legalize marijuana to stop gang violence and the proliferation of gangs. Now, it was actually 65% of respondents in British Columbia. So you have 2/3 of this province is aware that prohibition creates gang violence, murders on the streets. That's a powerful awareness that people have that's accurate. And I commend people in British Columbia for being so aware. But it's never reflected in our legislature. In Victoria, not a single MLA ever gets up to propose repealing the prohibition that causes this gang violence. And in the federal parliament, not a single member of parliament's ever gotten up to propose that we repeal the marijuana prohibition that causes this violence. So we have two disconnects. One, from reality. The government is ignoring cause and effect. They created the cause of the effect we're seeing on the streets. Government policy created the violence and murders on the street. They are actually responsible, but they don't actually accept any of that responsibility. And secondly, they don't acknowledge that this is a democracy and they're supposed to reflect the will of the people, even if it goes against what they believe. Well, there's none of that. So we have a dysfunctional democracy, and we have governments who are in cahoots with organized crime, handing them a massive multi-billion-dollar market as a matter of government policy. What is the public benefit for this colossal use of resources and this colossal crushing of the human spirit by jailing people who are simply exercising their free choice?